one content warning for this episode. In the interview, Andy is going to talk about the death of his son Jake and some of the unhelpful ways that his faith interacted with that awful experience. If this is going to be very difficult for you to listen to, obviously just feel free to move on to the next episode. Or if you want to listen, please look after yourself, make sure there's people around who can care for you through it. This is Justice Worriers, a podcast where we think about things that are right and wrong in our world and how Christian ideas can help us respond to them. We prefer hard questions over easy answers, and we'd love you to join us in our ramblings. Listen in and contact us using the links in the show notes.
I've got absolutely no idea what episode we're on.
Oh no, we normally know. Well, don't say in case we stick this in somewhere in a different
that's
order.
a good point. Yeah, we don't know yet, so I can just edit it in later.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to start. Hello and welcome to Justice Warriors, episode we're not quite sure yet. As usual, I'm joined by Leah. Say hi, Leah.
Hi there.
And Jorg. Say hi, Jorg.
Hello.
And confusingly again, we have a special guest who's called Andy. We even had a previous guest called Andy, and obviously I'm called Andy. It's very confusing. Say hi, Andy.
Hello.
Hello, Andys.
So yeah, once again, I'm just one of many Andys in the room. It happens to me a lot. So welcome, Andy. We asked you here just to talk about your life, your story, things like that. So do you know where to start? Should I ask you something? Or?
Yeah, I think I don't want to go back to baby times, you know what I mean? Other than to say that I am a Staines person. I was born in Staines, so I've always been local. And I suppose I'll begin in my teens, really, that that's where I met Sue, my wife, at a congregational church that I used to go to as a teenager. Mm-hmm. And I think the only reason I really went along was because it was over the road, really, and it's convenient for mum and dad to chuck me out, get rid of me. Uh-huh. So I went to that, and that's how I sort of first got into church life, really, and started to learn about things, about how churches tick and the Gospels, that kind of thing. And I suppose my first step into having a believing faith was about when I was about 13, and I kind of then grew up in that church, and then my next step would have been to be involved in a church plant, which we did in Stanwell Moor. So I have the record actually for being the quickest or the shortest member of Staines Congregational Church. Would you believe I wouldn't commit to being a member there, but Sue, we were going to get married, and Sue said, I think you should show some kind of commitment. So I thought, reluctantly, I thought, okay, I will do, and I became a member one week, only to learn the next week that actually those people going on the church plant were all going to be pushed off and weren't going to be members anymore. so that was me. So we started this church plant in Stanwell Moor.
So that must have been quite intense.
It was, yeah. I was aged 20. Sue and I got married while we were there. We actually moved to Stanwell Moor. We believed in it so much. Right. We thought we want to be local, mm-hmm. and we actually moved to Stanwell Moor. So how radical was that?
And for people who aren't kind of local to here, what's the difference between the two places, Staines and Stanwell Moor?
Well, it's divided by a reservoir. I can't tell you which one, but there's a big reservoir in between, and Stanwell Moor is further towards the airport. Mm-hmm. And then across the road from that you will find Stanwell, so that's often confusing, Stanwell Moor and Stanwell.
So it's right in the shadow of Heathrow, isn't it? Literally,
totally,
planes going over your head.
The planes used to fly over the hall where we met, so you had to stop proceedings to let the plane go over. And then from there, I was involved in another church plant through the church in Stanwell. So we went across the other side.
Wow.
So yeah, we were at the forefront really of we felt like sort of church pioneers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we were like youth group. No, we were house group leaders at that stage. I think Sue and I must have been the youngest house group leaders that were going. And we learnt so much, and we encountered people's difficulties and problems that phased us quite a bit. You know, we didn't know such things went on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had somebody in our house group who was excommunicated from a cult and was separated from his wife and children.
Wow.
So we had big things to deal with. But by the grace of God, we kind of got through it. But you know, the thing we learnt was that church plants were so hard to maintain, and the one in Stanwell Moor petered out eventually, and so did the one at Stanwell. They were just hard to maintain. When we went back to like the parent church. So we were at the parent church for, I don't know, about 5-6 years. Again, we started to be involved in youth work then. So that's when we started doing the youth work many years ago. And you know, they were really positive times back then. Mm-hmm. I think because we were young as well, so we had a positive outlook. And you know, I don't know if you got recollection of, you know, church in the 90s. Certainly my church, it was like what would you call it? A free church, evangelical church.
Did you say it was congregational?
No, that was the previous one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a different church. Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, house church. I don't know. There's many descriptions, isn't it? You know, it's that happy clappy, isn't it? That's another one. It's that kind of church. And you know, there's a positive outlook being preached from the front. We were always looking for revival. You know, revival was always round the corner. Yeah. But it didn't come.
Well, I think you're right. There is that kind of, it's very sort of buoyed up, isn't it? There's this kind of total anticipation the whole time of what's going to happen next, and
well, it's a bit of a 90s thing, isn't it, too?
Well, you think we were all happy in the 90s?
Oh, there's just that revival. Yeah, you know, the end of the Cold War, and, you know, we were just going to go off to brighter futures if God was going to bring revival, and then we're all done.
Yeah.
Then the church plants essentially failing don't really fit in with that picture, right?
No, they don't. You're right. No. They were kind of like hard because, I mean, the church plants were on the local estates. Mm-hmm. You know, you were dealing with different kind of reality, really, which we didn't really see in our main church. And the other thing I remember from that time is like the songs we were singing. You know, Hillsong was very big then, and we would be singing things like "All things are possible." Mm-hmm. You know, it was all very faith building, and you know, some of that was good, but we'll come to that in the future, you know, as I talk, and you know, some of that wasn't so good for me. Yeah, that was, I suppose, my sort of upbringing. Those that die by wearing the badge, they're the chosen ones. Those who died are justified for wearing the badge, they're the chosen ones. They're justified. Those that died, they're the chosen whites. And then Sue and I got married while we were at this church, and we had our first children. So Jake was our firstborn, and then we had Katie after that. Yeah, so I'd say that this is where we come to about 2008 in our family. Jake had started to have some problems with his, he was feeling dizzy, and he started to feel headaches quite a bit. So we got concerned about him, and we took him to the doctors. And the first diagnosis was that he had some kind of infection or something, something viral. It would pass with some antibiotics. But it continued. So we went back to the doctors, and the doctor was still a bit unsure. But as Sue was leaving with Jake, he said, "Oh, I think we should just do a scan." So he went for a MRI scan, and then we had a massive bombshell dropped on us, sort of a week later, that they had found a brain tumour in his brain, obviously. And I suppose we kind of, it was something we definitely weren't expecting. It was totally out of the blue. But this, I suppose, is where our faith background kind of kicked in a bit,
Right.
because we kind of think, well, God can sort this one out.
Right.
It's not a problem for us. God will sort it. And as the weeks went on, we began to really cling on, what we thought were the applicable verses that we could find in the Bible. Mm-hmm. We have, lots to hear about Jesus healing people. Yeah. The disciples healed people. Why can't he heal Jake? Surely he's going to. And we've got the faith for this. And we kind of withdrew to our castle of our house, really. And I remember in our kitchen, we started writing out Bible verses, and we plastered them all around the kitchen, so that they were there. We could look at them, we could pray, and we could cling on to them. Mm-hmm. We thought, we're going to be all right. But then things started to get more serious. The illness got more serious. Jake he had a stent in his brain to release some pressure from the fluid that was in his brain, which was, major. He was, only 6, but still we felt God can sort this out, not a problem. And in fact, some ways you kind of think, well, the worse it gets, the more God can do. But still, then it got to his second stent. And then finally, it was kind of, we can't do anything for him. And I still remember having a meeting with the consultant. He said that, we can't operate. I'm afraid it's the end. And I still remember saying to the consultant, this is how convinced I was. It's not a problem. God can sort it. I said that to the consultant, and he just looked at me like, "You're mad." Yeah. Kind of like, the look of pity, really. Right. So then they kind of washed their hands, really, said we can't do any more. He came back home with us, and then we had to take him back in again. He had another episode of fainting, semi sort of unconsciousness. We took him back into the hospital, and they phoned up. St George's was where he was having his operations. They said, no, we can't do anything for him. And I remember they sort of St Peter's wanted to move him out of the room because they needed a room for him, for somebody else. So they put up these big screens, and they wheeled him out with us behind the screen so that no one could see, into a side room. And we were in there for a couple of hours, and they said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to take him home? And we said, yes. We want to be home with him. So we got him home, and he was in our bed. He was unconscious, really, at that point. He couldn't communicate with us. I think he might have moved a couple of times. But still, we felt, God can do something. Surely. He heals people. He raises Lazarus from the dead. He can do something. So we would still be praying. We had a a brilliant nurse called Debbie who was doing the palliative care. She came and helped us in the last couple of days. And then he finally passed away in our house. And I guess really I kind of could hit my first painting at this point if that's okay. Yeah.
So to explain to the listener, Andy's brought some paintings that he's hoping will help him talk about, I guess, the different feelings and how you dealt with this whole thing.
So just a bit of background. I do paint. I do paint, and to help me get through it all, really, I kind of done some paintings. I thought I would do self-paint therapy. So in the early days, it was very easy for me to paint abstract because in abstract art, I could put my emotions into it, and I could use symbols that would be to me, they'd be quite private, but it would express my kind of feelings. So this is my first painting around that time. So I don't know if you want to try and describe.
I should describe. You correct me. So this is the biggest one. Is that right? Yeah. The biggest of the ones you brought. And there's bright colours. There's a lot of bright red, and there's sort of diagonal lines cutting through it. So it's one side is a kind of a bright red with a kind of flame-like colour over it, and on the other side there's a darker red and a darker blue, and it looks like a face. Maybe is there an eye looking at me from the left-hand side, or?
That is like a symbol that I use for, like your inner being, your soul and your heart, like your inner self.
Right. Okay. So that's like some concentric circles of the darker colour within the red, and cutting through all the colours. What looked to me like knife cuts vertically or diagonally vertically down through the colours. So it almost looks like something that's been ripped apart by a wild animal. Is that at all anything like?
This is good. No, do you know I like that? Because I do these paintings and I kind of say to people, you see what you want to see in them. I don't mind.
Right.
So this painting is representing a moment that occurred when Jake was in our bed. The painting is called From My Hands. He was in our bed in this sort of semi-unconscious phase, and what happened was a bird fell down the chimney into the grate. So these lines going down are actually like the grate,
right,
in front of the fireplace.
It is quite bird-like now you mention it.
So a bird fell down, and I had to take the grate away and reach my hands in to pick this little bird up. And we opened up the French doors, and I went outside, and I just let the bird go, and the bird flew off.
Right.
Now, I remember one of your episodes, you were talking about events that had occurred, and you don't know where they coincidences, or you were talking about falling off a bike or something, weren't you? And,
right.
So this is something that happened to me, and I can't say, did God make this happen, or is it a coincidence? But it really kind of just stuck in my mind at the time. I'm rescuing this bird that's in peril. I'm taking him out and I'm releasing him into the world. And the bird flew off. And it kind of, later on in the stage, it really felt, Jake has been released. No matter what else I might think, Jake has been released from his pain. Right. And he's flown off, to his freedom. So I can find some peace and happiness in that. Right. So that's what that painting's about.
Right. So what were your feelings when you were painting this?
So I had a real mixture because there is a lot of red in it. So kind of red is kind of pain and suffering. And this was quite early days, so I think that is kind of that was kind of my overall feeling at the time, I guess. You got the blue area here, which is like the sky, but most of it is quite painful. But at the same time, it's trying to look forward to something that will give me peace.
Right. So like experiencing pain, but also trying to understand this possible sign of something at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
What was it? What was it like for you then to adjust to this reality, though? I mean, like, did you think the moment that the bird flew off and Jake was still alive that was sort of showing you something about what would come, or was his death then still, in a sense, a surprise and needing to readjust your expectations, obviously?
I had a numbness, I think. After he'd passed away, within a couple of hours, I just felt really, really numb. And I remember going out that night, and I sat in the garden, and there was a beautiful sunset. And I just thought to myself, how can the world be so cruel and so beautiful at the same time?
Yeah.
I was used.
Yeah.
So, I mean, after that, of course, we have the funeral arrangements, which, we did. But, even at the funeral, I thought, and Sue did as well, our faith was still kicking in. We still couldn't believe that God's going to let this happen. And we thought, God could raise him. He raised Lazarus. Jake could be raised at the funeral. And you kind of get this crazy sort of thinking that maybe that's God's plan, because if God does that, then everyone's going to see. It's going to be a marvelous witness to everybody. So we were still thinking that. The funeral came and went, still didn't happen, and then Jake went to a chapel of rest, and we went to visit him a couple of times, and he was just lying still, completely, he was white, almost stone-like. And we went there. I can't believe I'm talking about this, actually. We went there a couple of times, and we were still believing, and we would pray over his body and ask God to resurrect him. And then I'd go home and thought, well, that didn't work. I mean, what does it say in the Bible? Well, Jesus commanded people to be raised from the dead. So I went back the next day, and I stood over him and commanded him to get up. I still had that faith that God would do something, but it didn't happen. So then we had to kind of try and live with this reality. This isn't going to happen, is it? God's not going to raise him. So what's the purpose behind it all? So I'll go into my next painting, which is what I call this my angry painting. Put it that way.
We get it the right way up.
Yeah. So that's going to be hard to describe, isn't it?
Well, so this looks like an explosion. So at the centre there's like a fiery explosion-like ball. And then kind of flying outwards in all directions are lots of different things, which, having heard you speak about the last one, I'm sure all have meaning, so I want to hear about. So on one side, in the bottom right corner, there's some yellow. It looks like a lighter place, and maybe there's a door or something that maybe light shining into the doorway or out of the doorway. And then on the left there's a black shape, which is a kind of a tangled shape, but also with a white circle inside it, maybe like a moon. And the other two corners are things that look like, well, in one corner it looks like almost a maze or something like that that's kind of flying towards us. And then on the bottom left there's there's like shafts of light shooting out, or maybe shards of glass, or something cutting. It reminds me of the grill from the previous painting. So it's very kinetic, and there's a lot of stuff flying at me very fast.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So this painting is called "What You Have in Mind," and it's the title's got two angles to it. One is this shape over on the left hand side is how I kind of see the tumour that was in Jake's mind. So what you have in mind is like a literal statement. That's what Jake had in his mind, this tumour. The other part of that statement, what you have in mind, was my question to God.
Yeah.
What do you have in mind? Because I don't understand. And you said, it is kind of flying at me that the central light is God.
Right.
And the rest is kind of all confusing, and it's like a pattern and shapes that kind of could fit but don't fit. And I was trying to work out, what's your plan, God? How does this all fit together? Because it's just really confusing. And it was a kind of like, what are you playing at, God, really? Was kind of my feeling.
I can't believe how not angry you sound while you're speaking. Are you actually not angry? Did you used to be angry?
I used to be, yeah.
And you're not anymore, or
no?
Skipping ahead.
Yeah, skipping ahead.
The word that came into my mind when I was listening to you talk was cruelty. It felt to me that you had been handed a worldview that was exceptionally cruel to you in the time when you needed help.
Yeah.
Does that? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It just feels really cruel.
As in terms of this sort of faith building.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that you. I mean, apart from the specific false hope that you're describing, there's also the general sense of everything will be all right if you're going the right way with God.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at this point, I was kind of feeling scared of God,
right?
Because I thought, well, you love me, but you haven't stepped in to rescue me. And Jake was a little child. Yeah. Why wouldn't you save a little child? I didn't at any point blame God for the tumour. I don't think that God would put the tumour in there for one moment. I don't think he would do evil actions like that. But I couldn't understand why he wouldn't rescue somebody who was in that situation. And I was kind of thinking, God, how much would you be prepared to let me go through? That's the kind of thing that worried me. It's kind of like a Job situation, isn't it? Yeah. You look at Job. How much was God prepared to let him go through? And I had to try and reconcile that with God's love. So my world was kind of, I would describe it as an unstable world at that point. Everything was kind of unstable. Everything that I knew before, which I was certain about, was thrown up into the air. And I have this little saying, which I still stick to today, which is, the more I know, the less I understand.
Yeah. I mean, I have a question too about that theology. Sort of looking back on it, I don't quite know how to phrase it, but would you live it differently if you had to go through the same situation again? And the reason behind that question is there perhaps an aspect of that theology that helped you to wrestle with what you were encountering? Maybe not really, wanting or being ready to face the possibility of Jake dying. So was there an aspect of that in that it was just that theology for that time? Or would you say if I had to go through this again, I would think about it differently?
Well, I guess that's where I'm kind of screwed up these days, because I would, I wouldn't go through that again, because it turned out to be not my experience.
Yeah.
maybe for other people, maybe God does heal their children, but for me it didn't. That's not my experience. So for me personally, I wouldn't go through that again today. I'm kind of left with this dilemma, to be honest, to pray for people for healing. And to this day, I can only call on God to show mercy. Because for me, he didn't heal my child. And I find it really difficult to pray for other people. As I heard you talk about this, Jorg, actually, and you expressed it really well. Because you were talking about your friend, weren't you?
My stepfather, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I too would have the same problem, and I can only pray, please God, have mercy.
Yeah.
Whatever that is going to look like, I don't know, but please God, have mercy.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I can sort of get down on my knees and I can beg him for mercy. That's all I can do, really.
I guess that's partially where my question is coming from, because in that situation I realized, so to the listener, this was a death in my family where the person who was gravely ill asked us all to have faith and pray for him, and he died of a tumor. And it was a very upsetting time, but I also at that point had to accept that was his way of reconciling his world. So there doesn't seem to be a right way to do it.
Who asked you to pray?
Well, yeah, to kind of stand firm against his tumor in his sort of faith language. And as I wasn't the one going through it, I had to accept that, and I had to respect the way he chose to deal with it, because in the end, if we know that death is at our door, there probably are all sorts of very wrong ways to do it, but there's probably not a right way to handle it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't tell somebody if somebody asked me to pray. I wouldn't. Of course, I wouldn't turn around and say, "Didn't work for me." Do you know what I mean?
We can try, but
So I would absolutely say yes, I'll pray for you, but I just wouldn't sort of tell them how I'm going to pray. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't tell them about my capacity.
Yeah.
My faith capacity. I wouldn't tell them, because I couldn't do that to somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, listening to you speak, like a part of our faith tradition is this healing and stuff and these stories. But if our tradition prevents us from actually doing something that cares for someone in the position you were in, then it's worse than useless, right? If it makes it worse instead of making it better, then we've got something wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Some of those in workforces.
So if you want me to go, I can carry on.
Carry on.
So my next painting then, I'll get my next one out, which is that one there.
Okay, so this is another one that's fairly small, or smaller than the first one. Now this one, there's much more smooth lines in this. So in the background, it's sort of very deep red, different shades of red, but like a sense of like behind everything is this redness. And then there's some concentric circles that are maybe about the core of your being or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And so in front of the red and near the concentric circles, there's like a wedge of sort of yellowish colour with a greenish tip.
It's like cheese, isn't it?
It looks like a piece of cheese, or like a menhir or something, like a big piece of stone.
Yeah.
And then in front of that, there's like almost a musical looking sort of string that curves around. That's deep blue. It could be like a hair or even a whip or something like that, and there's a purple thing called, it's kind of cross, it's like stick, like cross coming across that. So the whole thing makes me, I don't know, it makes me worried that there's this boiling red, but then there's this light in front.
Yeah, so the boiling red is still there. But I'm beginning to think, I'm beginning to feel a bit more hopeful in this painting.
Right.
And it's called Always Returning. This blue line that's coming up is like the representing the it's going to return. I'm going to get back.
Okay. So
to some form of normality again. And in the background, the big yellow cheese is like representing a mountain that's just stood before me.
Right.
I've got to cross this mountain. And I've got the line that cuts across it because I went to a conference through work about bereavement, and they were discussing about I wasn't supposed to be there. I found out eventually because it was like for managers, for HR managers, and it was like teaching them about bereavement, and there I was in the early stage of bereavement, sitting there listening to it. But actually, they were describing about the stages of bereavement, which was actually, it's got to be helpful to me because I could recognise myself at the very beginning of the stages. And so that line that dissects it is kind of a barrier that I thought, once I've crossed this barrier, I know that I'm going to be all right in these stages.
Right.
So I'm going to get through that. It's kind of a hopeful painting. So it's always returning. I am going to come back. I am going to get through this. It's hard now, but I will get through it. And the other part about always returning is that I try to look for comfort in ways that I could carry on with the memories of Jake. We were determined that we wouldn't lose him in our memories. We carried on. He's still very much a part of the family. We put up pictures. We always do something special for his birthday. The children know about him. We've talked about him. And we went on after Jake died. We already had Katie. We went on to have two more boys, Timmy and Harry. And it's funny because I can see so much of Jake in them. They aren't Jake, but there are still images of Jake in them. And that's quite comforting. So that is kind of also in this painting, always returning, that somehow, Jake has come back to me in bits here and there. There's still some comfort in that.
And is there a sense of some sort of faith returning at this stage, or is that just something you can't entertain at this point? Is there any comfort in faith, or is it just that just didn't work? I don't know where that fits in now.
I'm still in confusion. I guess I think I would be losing some of my anger at God. And I'm kind of getting to the point where, I think, don't understand. I'm not sure I'm going to understand. And it's trying to look forward and live with that, really.
Is God in this picture?
No.
Right. So I want to ask you at some point, maybe now's a good time, all of the pictures seem to have sort of cracks, black thin cracks drawn on them.
Yeah, that's actually nothing to do with.
Is that part of the?
Yeah, it's because
canvas?
But it's because I started painting abstracts before these ones. So those cracks appear in all my abstracts.
Do they have a meaning though?
They don't have a meaning, but I kind of use them sometimes to just draw the eye in certain ways to bring a bit of energy or direction to the painting.
Yeah, I like that.
It's just a kind of style thing, really. Yeah. And then, shall I go to my last painting?
Yeah. By the way, listener, I'm going to, if Andy gives me permission, I'm going to put some pictures of these on our website when we put this up, so you should be able to see them yourself. Okay, so this one's a little bit bigger. It has a very deep blue background. And there's something like a whale, there's a lighter blue sort of swimming across from the left into the deep blue. That reminds me of a whale, and then over the top of that are what look like ribbons, kind of falling down. There's three of them, and maybe the whale is kind of part of another one. They look like ribbons. They're yellow with mostly yellow with some red bits. And then running across, gosh, it's interesting what you don't even notice until you look again. So running across all of this sideways are white lines that look like motion lines or text running across. So through everything, there's these white, very, very organized rectangles or lines. Yeah, there definitely could be writing.
They're not. Well, I don't mind. You can say whatever. So this painting is called Walk Between the Raindrops. I think here, at this stage, I was beginning to, I don't know, is this fair to say that this was a kind of look back to my sort of church 90s and a kind of, do you know, this is my reality now. And Walk Between the Raindrops, I got the idea from a Christian band, American Christian band called Adam Again, who are no longer. And they sang this song called Walk Between the Raindrops, and I can read out a part of the lines, lyrics, and it said, walk between the raindrops if you can. Lord, tell me what kind of man makes this plan? I don't understand such a grand scam. And it was, yes, I kind of almost felt a bit scammed. You know, I was really believing in something that I heard people talk about, expressed from the front of the church, expressed in songs. All things are possible, and I felt a bit led along, I suppose. And this is my kind of reality painting to myself. You can't walk between the raindrops. So the lines going across a rain is the rain coming down. Right. It's impossible for us to go out unless we have an umbrella, of course. You can't go out in rain and not get wet somehow. It's always going to hit you. And in life, I think we're going to get hit by things that are unpleasant. And I don't think we can avoid them. And I don't think there is some great magical, what do I want to say? I've lost my train of thought now. I don't think there's any magical formula that we can use to escape them. Even the rich people, even people that have got millionaires, they're going to have their problems. They're not going to escape. There's no one who's going to escape. And what's coming down there is like a chains that are running down the painting, and there's kind of like chains of events.
That was the thing I called ribbons.
Ribbons, yeah.
They're
like chain of events. You know, things that we all do have consequences. And again, at that stage, I suppose I was looking at myself, and I was kind of blaming myself, really, at the point. I was looking at chain of events and thinking, is it something that I've done that's caused this? You know, God, am I the reason that this happened to my son? And, you know, I was... Yeah, so I was feeling a bit of guilt, really. And like I've been entrusted with these children to bring them up, and I couldn't even do it. He died at 6. It was a tragedy. I was kind of think, what would other people, what will they think? I was kind of like looking in at myself. So I had those kind of feelings when I was doing this. And another thing that kind of expressed, I was thinking at the time was, we were taught to dream big at church, and how everybody, God can make your life marvellous, and he's got a wonderful plan for you, and you've got to reach your potential. And everybody's got the capacity to change the world. And I was kind of feeling at this stage, well, actually, no. Some people are going to live totally ordinary lives. They're not going to have the capacity to change the world because of things around them. I know that we as the church need to help people. We need to help them escape from their chains. But actually, some people are going to be in ordinary lives all their life. I've worked in factories before, so I know what it's like for the ordinary person to have a humdrum life, come into the factory, do the same thing every day, go home, same thing every day. That's their expectation, really. And I think, yes, sure, God can bring comfort. He can help people get through. He can certainly help people to improve their lives. But I don't think everybody is actually going to have this dynamic, change the world kind of life.
Yeah.
And I think as a church, we've got to look to people that are in humdrum lives and think, how can we help them and bring comfort to them and help them? I mean, everybody, in a sense, has a dynamic life in their own little world.
Yep.
It's about the people that we live with and the people that we care for, isn't it? And everybody can do marvellous things at looking after people, changing other people's lives in little ways. It doesn't have to be some spectacular world scene kind of life, does it? Banners in the sky. Everybody's important.
So it seems like you're rejecting two worldviews there. You're rejecting the worldview that you sort of grew up in, of God will look after you through and nothing bad will happen to you. And then you're also rejecting the kind of probably just the Western worldview of everyone can be a superstar and
because I suppose I was kind of like empathizing with people that I would meet that were going through similar things, terrible things. And I always thought, all along, oh, actually, there's going to be someone in the world who's worse off than me. I've lost a child. There's going to be somebody who's lost their whole family right now. Somebody's going to be going through something totally more awful than what I'm going through. And I'm kind of empathizing with people. There's a lot of people out there in lots of pain.
Where do you think this sort of prosperity gospel light came from? This idea that, if we're just with God, things will work out. Is it just a youthful optimism? Is it a flaw in our thinking? I mean, surely death was around when you had the church plants as well, or people going through difficult times. So where is that? How can this confidence dock onto our faith?
Yeah.
When actually around us, if we open our eyes, it's not like that.
I guess a lot of it must be youth aspects, mustn't it? Because there must have been people in the church at the time who were experiencing, the deaths of their relatives and things. And I guess it must be the kind of circle that I was mixing with. We were all young and healthy. Our parents were all healthy. And but I don't think it was particularly preached from the front of the church that you're going to face hard things in your life. Although the Bible does say that, you're going to have many troubles, but I don't think that was particularly preached from the front of the church.
I think it is a real. I was like, go on, Jörg.
No, I was just going to ask, in that faith bit, like, was there sort of a hero of faith kind of idea behind it? So, like, if you're strong, then you can overcome these things, or?
Yeah, I would say that. There was another song at the time, wasn't there? "Walk by Faith." Was it Noel Richards sang it? I think, didn't he? Okay. I don't think it was his song. We would sing that regularly. We walk by faith. It was, it kind of made you feel strong. Even if God does throw things at us, it's going to be all right. We're going to get through it.
Leah, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I was more of a reflection, really. Well, I do have a question too, but I was going to have just more of a reflection on what Andy and Jörg were saying, that it's really hard with the question of how we speak to young people about faith, isn't it? Because there is that natural tendency in youth to believe that you can save the world, and that there's a desperate longing to be significant, and very easily, and this was true for me, Christianity kind of docks onto that, as you say, and kind of hypes it. And yet, you kind of don't want to totally lose that. You don't want to totally throw that out. And there's also so much depression amongst young people as well. You want to give people a hope without it being so black and white that it ends up being no useful hope at all.
That's kind of where my first question came from. Is that, like, there is this need for us to make sense of things, right? And then we do project, and we do want to wrestle and find meaning and find patterns, and this comes from this, and this is what's going to happen. And to some extent that's healthy, and perhaps the only way we can face crises like this. But wait, at what point does it begin to hurt people? And at what point do we need to give it up entirely? But then what's left, like you said, Leah, like, what do you then teach? In terms of, what do you hold on to? Do you just kind of go through your day and whatever comes, you accept it and move on? We're not built for that. So there's something strange happening in our psyche, that we do want to make sense of things and reorder our lives when something traumatic like this has happened.
And also, what is trusting God? Leah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I suppose my question really is, how do you still have a faith, Andy?
That was my question too.
That would be my question.
Well, I suppose this brings me to my next question, really, which was, I felt like I had to abandon the question, why did it happen? I don't know. I can't answer that one. So I had to fill that gap with another question, which was, why should I love God?
Yeah, that's where I'm left. I think your description about feeling, that was so raw, that you felt scared of God. What could He put you through next? Why should you love a God like that?
And the fact that we're actually commanded to love God in the Bible, and I sort of think, well, if you're commanded, I don't command my wife to love me.
That probably wouldn't work.
Why do you command us to love you? Are you kind of thinking that maybe there's going to be situations where I won't want to love you, but you command me to love you? And I kind of came to this conclusion that actually, the way that God loves me is unconditional, and that's what love is to God. And he doesn't love me for what I do, thank goodness. It's love without strings attached. And I felt, well, do I love God that way? Can I love God that way? And that was kind of my release, because actually, yeah, I don't know about theology behind this. You might blow Sister Kingdom up. but I was thinking, yeah, I mean, why do I love you, God? Because I love you, because you love me. I love you because you made this world. I love you because you're good. Do I love you because I love you? No. I thought, well, I have to love God unconditionally. I have to love him regardless of what he does. And then I started to think, well, yeah, so I don't have to question God. This is going to sound mad, isn't it? I won't question God about this. Why did this happen? Because actually, I don't love God because of it. I love God because I love God. It's unconditional. I can't explain it. It's unconditional.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, in a way, you're saying yes to life, aren't you? I mean, that whole question, why do you do these things that way and whatever, it just, it takes your eye off the gift of life and just being here and saying, I'm just going to take it and love it anyway, because everything else would be a waste. Like, accept God's creation, accept his world and in the way it's there, because the wrestling isn't going to get the answer. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me.
I do find that really moving, that idea of, I guess the idea that we as people are capable of that thing that is supposed to be only for God, of unconditional love. I find that incredibly inspiring as an idea.
Yeah.
And it's like the only thing that makes sense of what you're doing in terms of your relationship with God. It's amazing.
No. I kind of like change between it's inspiring. No, actually, it's totally insane.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, we wouldn't be here if we were looking for like a watertight argument, right? We would have given up a long time ago.
Yeah.
So my other question to you: so why do you stick with God? I think you've answered incredibly powerfully. But why do you stick with Christians, especially when Christians taught you this stuff that turned out, it sounds like, to be really harmful?
Yeah, I mean, I've still got a belief in, people. They didn't do things. They didn't preach things to be harmful or hurtful. People didn't write songs to be harmful. They would have had their good purpose in doing it. And I still think, to some people, it's still going to be inspiring and helpful. Sorry, I kind of forgot what your question was.
Why do you bother with Christians?
Well, yeah. Well, it's what we're supposed to do, isn't it?
That's too easy.
We're supposed to,
But you never walked away, or did you walk away and come back?
I didn't walk away. I mean, this is how I ended up coming to St. John's. We had to leave our other church because it was just too painful. Not because we fell out with anybody. In fact, they were brilliant once he died. They were fantastic, and they really, really looked after us. And And I'll tell you what, I had a fantastic house group. I loved my house group that I used to go and meet. In fact, when I joined St John's, I was still going to my old house group for a couple of years. I really loved it, and I loved the people. So they were fantastic, but we just felt it was just too painful for us to keep coming back to this place, and we needed a clean slate, really, and that's when we came to St John's, and we'd moved to Egham by that point anyway, actually. So Jake, when he died, he lived here in Egham. So that's when we came along to St John's, and people were marvellous. They were just so loving to us. We had the meal service. Mm-hmm. People would come round with meals, and it was fantastic. St John's is a really caring church, and it's marvellously organised. I know it may not, it doesn't seem like that sometimes, but actually, compared to some churches, there's an amazing organisation and depth to the church. Right. So we feel really at home there, and I believe that we are all loved by God, and we've all got to carry on, haven't we, with each other? We're all so different, aren't we? We're such a mixed bunch, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
But we've got to learn to live with people and be tolerant, isn't it? Trying to be tolerant with with each other.
Well, you seem to have taken that.
I mean, I look for blessings now in my life, and there's plenty of blessings every day, really, isn't there? I've got fantastic children. I've got my health. I've got a fantastic wife. Hello, Sue, if you're going to be listening. I must tell you, actually, that one of the things I learnt from early on was the statistics, right? That when a child dies in a family, 75% of the couples will experience problems in their marriage. Wow. And 50% will separate. So for us and Sue, for Sue and I to be together is such a wonderful blessing. It really is. It's a miracle, really. That's what helps me day to day.
Right. Well, unless either of you have a burning question, I'm going to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Andy,
thanks for having me.
Andy, I cannot believe the courage that you've had to come on, and we're so grateful to you for speaking to us about things that are so personal. I found it incredibly inspiring and really moving. I'm sure we'll have thoughts after this and try and discuss them, but I mean, it's been so amazing to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Cool. See you next time.
Kill it in the name of. Kill it in the name of. Kill it in the name of.
You've been listening to Justice Warriors. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also follow us on social media by searching for Justice Warriors, where warrior is spelt like someone who worries about things. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating, since that helps other people find us. Also, please tell your friends about us in real life. We'd love to hear from you. To get in touch, use the email address in the show notes or contact us via the social media links. Thanks for listening.
Now you do what they told you. And now you do what they told you. You can't